Anime is a multi-billion-dollar industry, pulling in over $19 billion a year. On the surface, it seems like a dream. Breathtaking visuals, unforgettable stories, and a global fan base hooked on everything from high-energy fight scenes to tear-jerking dramas. But behind the magic, the very artists bringing these worlds to life are barely making enough to get by. For years, industry giants raked in the profits, while animators struggled. But now, Japan is finally stepping in, launching investigations and enforcing new laws. Could this be the start of real change? To really get the full picture, we need to go back to where it all began. Now think back to 1998, when Pokemon's Thunderbolt struck America. That was the moment anime truly exploded in the US, shaping an entire generation's childhood. Sailor Moon's magical schoolgirls fought to protect the universe. One Piece took fans on an outrageous journey filled with pirates and cyborgs, and Ash Ketchum set out on his never-ending quest to catch 'em all. These shows didn't just entertain, they helped turn anime into a booming industry. But the truth is that success hasn't trickled down to the animators working day and night to bring these stories to life. The relentless demands of the industry push them to their limits, sometimes with heartbreaking consequences. Most anime is still hand-drawn, a painstaking process that takes incredible skill and years of experience. Shingo Adachi, known for his work on Sword Art Online, has talked about the dire shortage of talented animators in Japan. With nearly 200 anime shows produced each year, there simply aren't enough skilled artists to keep up. So studios turn to freelancers, many of whom work for shockingly low wages, or even for free, all for the love of anime. At the very bottom of the production chain are the in-between animators. These freelancers are responsible for drawing the frames between the key moments of a scene. Directors and lead animators handle the most critical frames, but it's the in-betweeners who fill in the gaps, bringing the animation to life. Now, one reason studios lean so heavily on freelancers is to sidestep labor laws. Since freelancers are independent contractors, they don't get benefits, and studios can push insane hours without breaking any rules. And those hours? They're no joke. Animators have been known to pass out right at their desks. Just ask Henry Thurlow, an American animator in Japan, who told BuzzFeed News he landed in the hospital multiple times from sheer overwork. Even major studios aren't immune to controversy. Madhouse, a well-known animation powerhouse, was caught violating labor laws after employees clocked nearly 400 hours a month and worked 37 days straight without a single break. And in 2014, tragedy struck when an animator at the studio died by suicide. Investigators later discovered he had worked over 600 hours in the month before his death. It was ruled a work-related death, a grim reminder of just how extreme the conditions can be. And then there's the pay, or lack of it. In Japan, animators earn around 200 yen per drawing, less than $2. That might not sound terrible if they could crank out 200 drawings a day, but with anime's demanding level of detail, that's nearly impossible. According to the Japanese Animation Creators Association, animators in their 20s make about $10,000 a year. By their 30s, that number rises to $19,000. And even by their 40s and 50s, most are only making around $31,000. In Japan, where the poverty line sits at around $20,000 a year, that's barely enough to survive. But you see, the struggles of the anime industry can actually be traced all the way back to Osamu Tezuka, the visionary who essentially created modern anime. Back in the early 1960s, no one wanted to take the risk of producing an animated TV series, at least not at the cost Tezuka envisioned. But he was determined. He took a financial gamble, selling Astro Boy to television for far less than it was worth just to get it on the air. The plan wasn't to make money from the show itself, but to offset the losses through merchandise, figures, toys, and even candy. It worked. Astro Boy became a massive hit, and Tezuka proved that anime could be made cheaply and still turn a profit through secondary revenue. But in doing so, he unknowingly set a precedent that would haunt the industry for decades. The model stuck. Even as the anime business grew, production costs were kept low, with profits funneled into merchandise, publishing, and TV deals, leaving the actual creators with barely anything. That same flawed system is still in place today. TV stations, publishers, and toy companies take the lion's share of the revenue, while the people who bring anime to life, animators, voice actors, and production staff, are left fighting for scraps. Many animators don't even have contracts, agreeing to work over the phone or through messaging apps, which means they have no legal protection if things go wrong. Some wait months, 6 months or more, just to get paid. Others don't get paid at all. A recent study by the Nippon Anime and Film Culture Association, NAFCA, exposed just how brutal conditions have become. Conducted between December 4th, 2023 and January 31st, 2024, the survey gathered responses from 323 industry workers, animators, producers, sound designers, and voice actors. The findings were grim. On average, animators work 219 hours a month, with some pushing past 300. Despite this, their pay is shockingly low. Anywhere from $3.97 to $5.29 per hour, with an average of just $7.34. Over 70% of animators work more than 8 hours a day, with nearly 30% clocking in more than 10. The typical Japanese worker averages 162 hours a month, far less than the grueling schedules in anime production. And it doesn't ease with time. Even in their 50s, nearly 70% of animators are still working more than 8 hours a day, with over 20% putting in more than 10. Financially, it's just as dire. Almost 38% of animators earn less than $1,320 a month. With the hours they work, taking on a second job isn't an option, considering that the average monthly salary in Japan is about $2,200. It's clear how difficult it is to survive on anime wages alone. For younger workers, the gap is even starker. 67% of industry employees in their 20s make less than $1,320 a month, with 13% earning under $661. That's lower than what their peers in Tokyo make in other industries, and even below entry-level animators pay in the United States. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation in the report was the extent of workplace harassment. Nearly 2/3 of animators surveyed said they had been harassed at work. Even worse, 85.6% said they had witnessed it happening to others. A shockingly high number compared to national workplace statistics in Japan. Yet most of these cases go unreported. Only about 27% of those who experienced or witnessed harassment ever spoke up, largely because they didn't know who to report it to or feared retaliation. And lately, things have only gotten tougher. Many animators working for subcontractors are under crushing pressure, forced to take on impossible workloads for barely any pay. But now, for the first time in a long while, the Japanese government is finally starting to take notice. The Japan Fair Trade Commission, FTC, is finally stepping in, putting major anime studios under the microscope for unfair labor practices. They're gathering evidence now, with plans to drop a full report later this year. For many in the industry, this investigation is way overdue. Complaints have been stacking up for years. But with the threat of stricter regulations on the table, there's finally a real chance for change. A major shift already began last November when Japan introduced a new law protecting freelancers, including anime workers. This law requires written contracts that clearly state payment terms and working conditions, something that, unbelievably, wasn't always required before. It also bans companies from demanding extra work without additional pay, and forces them to compensate workers within 60 days of completing a project. For animators who have sometimes waited months or even years to get paid, this could be life-changing. The Japanese government is taking things a step further by launching a formal study into working conditions across the anime industry. They're urging workers to come forward with reports of unfair treatment, signaling that this time, they're serious about holding companies accountable. But it's not just internal pressure forcing these changes. Outside forces are making Japan pay attention, too. Last year, the United Nations called out the anime industry for its grueling hours and low wages. This wasn't just a passing remark. It was a direct critique of how one of Japan's most celebrated industries treats its workers. And the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Japanese government has spent years pushing its Cool Japan initiative, a campaign designed to showcase the country's cultural exports, anime being one of the biggest. But how could they proudly promote anime to the world while the very people creating it were being overworked and underpaid? That contradiction became harder to ignore, especially when anime officially surpassed steel and computer chips as one of Japan's top exports. If the government wants to keep anime thriving, it needs to ensure the people behind it aren't being exploited. At the same time, public awareness is growing. More and more stories about the harsh realities of freelance animators are coming to light, sparking discussions in Japan and beyond. Since the majority of anime workers are freelancers, this new awareness could be the push needed to change the industry from the inside out. And yet, even with these challenges, anime has never been more popular. During the pandemic, Demon Slayer: Mugen Train became the highest-grossing movie worldwide, pulling in over $470 million. That wasn't just a financial milestone, it was proof that anime had become a global phenomenon. Japan now produces around 400 anime series a year, and major players like Sony and Toho are investing heavily in streaming and distribution to ride the wave of this international boom. But behind the scenes, the industry still clings to outdated and unfair labor practices. And that's not just bad for workers, it's bad for business. If animators continue to be underpaid and overworked, the industry risks driving away talent, scaring off investors, and ultimately stunting its growth. So why does this exploitation persist? The truth is, competition in the anime world is brutal. So many people dream of working in the industry that studios don't feel pressured to offer better conditions. Young animators often believe that if they just push through, they'll eventually climb the ranks to become key animators or directors. But the reality is most never make it that far, and the struggle never truly ends. And as the industry evolves, new challenges emerge. Japan's aging population and rapid advancements in AI could lead to fewer job opportunities, particularly for newcomers trying to break in. On top of that, major studios are outsourcing more work overseas. Toei, one of the biggest names in anime, reportedly outsources 70% of its work to countries like the Philippines, keeping only the most crucial parts in Japan. Still, not all hope is lost. Some believe that smaller studios could start banding together, giving them more negotiating power and making it easier to push for fair wages. Legal experts like Yasunari Yamada, who specializes in freelance work, argue that laws alone won't be enough. Animators need to advocate for themselves and demand what they deserve. Encouragingly, more and more of them are starting to do just that. A major breakthrough came recently when Yumiko Shibata, a veteran in the industry, won a legal case against a publisher for unpaid royalties. This victory is more than just one animator getting what she was owed. It's a symbol of change. It proves that anime workers, after years of being taken advantage of, are beginning to push back. These new laws and investigations are a step in the right direction. But let's be real, they're just the beginning. The anime industry's deep-rooted exploitation isn't going to disappear overnight. Studios, corporations, and even fans all have a role to play in making sure the artists behind our favorite shows get the treatment they deserve. As anime continues to explode in popularity worldwide, one big question remains. Will Japan's most beloved art form finally start valuing its creators as much as its profits? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content like this.